They stole $10 million from me, my own parents, and handed it all to my sister as if I never existed. For years, I believed the glossy pictures, the staged smiles, the illusion of a perfect family. But behind closed doors, the truth was poison, favoritism, lies, and betrayal sharp enough to cut bone. That night, when my father dragged me by the hair and my mother screamed I was nothing, I swore the story wasn't ending there. They thought they erased me. They thought I would vanish. But I had a plan, and it would burn their empire down. The Whitaker house gleamed like something out of a magazine spread, every chandelier polished until it blinded you, every table arranged for perfection. On social media, our family was the picture of elegance. Charity galas, award dinners, smiling portraits in coordinated outfits. And I was always there, in the frame, though somehow never quite in focus, standing a step to the side, angled just enough that the world knew who the real star was. Tonight was no different. The dinner was staged to celebrate Tessa's remarkable achievements, a minor business award inflated into a triumph worth broadcasting to donors and friends. A professional camera crew flitted in and out, capturing the laughter, the toast, the curated image of familial love. I had been asked to prepare a short presentation about the scholarship fund I had quietly sustained for years. I spent nights drafting slides, hoping it might finally earn me a fraction of recognition. But just as I rose, holding the remote in trembling hands, the screen behind me flickered to black. My father coughed into his napkin, a deliberate cue. "Not now, Sloane," he said with the faint smile of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Let's keep the focus where it belongs." The applause resumed as though nothing had happened, and the cameras turned back toward Tessa, draped in champagne silk, hair glinting beneath the chandeliers. My slides, my voice, my years of effort, erased with the press of a button, I sank back into my chair, my skin burning though the room was cool. Lila, my mother, leaned across the table, her hand grazing mine as if in comfort. "Sweetheart," she murmured softly enough for only me to hear, "you need to work on being more sociable. Not everything has to be about control. People want warmth, not cold numbers." Her tone was sweet, but the words pierced deeper than any knife. Beside her, Tessa smiled, unaware or unwilling to stop the cruelty. I poured myself tea to keep my hands from shaking. As the steam rose, I touched the faint scar on my collarbone, a relic of a childhood accident I had never spoken of. I whispered under my breath, "I am still enough," as though the words might root me before I shattered entirely. Pinned to my lapel was a small brooch shaped like an old-fashioned key. It had once belonged to my grandmother, the only one who seemed to understand me, the only one who whispered that truth mattered more than appearances. Few noticed it, but those who did sometimes asked about the strange symbol etched into its handle. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, it matched the emblem carved into the antique safe in my father's study. I had never tested whether the key fit. Perhaps one day I would. The party carried on, glasses clinking, the illusion unbroken. Yet beneath the glittering surface, cracks spread like hairline fractures in glass. Later that night, as waitstaff cleared plates and guests drifted toward their cars, the family gathered in the smaller dining room. Someone had forgotten to mute the microphone connected to the live stream feed, and though the broadcast was supposed to be over, the mic caught everything. "The youngest deserves to manage the inheritance," Lila whispered to my father, her voice feather-light but heavy enough to bruise. "The eldest is too rigid, too disappointing." I froze. The words weren't meant for me, yet they seared through bone. Martin adjusted his tie, already preparing his next line for a visiting investor. "She's a liability," he said, the word clipped and businesslike. "If the board asks, we'll say she prefers independence. We'll cut her role cleanly. It's better for everyone." My throat closed. Liability. To my own parents, I was not a daughter, but a risk factor to be removed. Hours later, as I scrolled through my phone in a daze, a notification popped up from the family group chat. Tessa had sent a photo by mistake, a blurry screenshot of a legal document, my father's signature gleaming at the bottom. At the top, underlined in bold, were the words, Change of beneficiary. My name, once printed there, had been neatly replaced. Seconds later, the message vanished. Message deleted. But not before I saved it. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My inheritance, my grandmother's trust, had always been promised to me. She believed in what I was building, the scholarship fund, the legacy of helping those ignored by families like ours. Now even that was being stripped away. My phone buzzed again. A new message, this one from an unknown number. It was from an old teacher, retired now, who had once benefited from a scholarship I quietly funded. I never got to thank you properly, Sloane. What you've done matters. You've changed lives. I clutched the phone as tears pricked my eyes. For once, someone saw me, not the image my family sold to the world, not the invisible shadow beside Tessa, but me. And yet, a darker thought grew in the pit of my stomach. If my name had truly been erased, if the documents were real, then by my grandmother's anniversary, I might already be nothing more than a footnote. What would you do if you discovered your name had vanished from a will, stolen before you even had a chance to fight? By the following week, my title had been reduced to a formality. No longer director of outreach, I was now listed as a consultant, a word that looked professional on paper but meant nothing in practice. My salary had been slashed by more than 70%, a clean cut disguised as a necessary adjustment during restructuring. My father had delivered the news at breakfast, his fork clinking against porcelain as he spoke of budgets and optics, never once looking me in the eye. It wasn't just the money, it was the erasure. For years I had built programs, forged partnerships, created something tangible from the Whitaker fortune. Now it was as if my contributions had evaporated overnight, as if I had been nothing but an accessory to the empire of my parents' making. The cycle of gaslighting began in earnest. One day, my mother left a note on my desk. "So proud of your dedication. We couldn't have done this without you." Hours later, at dinner, she leaned close with a syrupy smile. "You're exhausting, Sloane. You make everything a battle. No wonder people hesitate to work with you." The next morning, silence. She would pass me in the hall without a glance, as though I were a stranger in my own home. Praise, criticism, neglect. It became a carousel of confusion, designed to keep me spinning, doubting, begging for stability. One night, unable to sleep, I passed my father's study and saw the glow beneath the door. Through the crack, I glimpsed him hunched over his desk, a stack of documents spread before him. The gold seal of the family trust shone in lamplight. He signed with deliberate strokes, each movement a blade carving me out of existence. When the pen lifted, he pressed his ring against the paper, a formality that stamped permanence into betrayal. The lawyer sitting across from him shifted uncomfortably. "Are you sure you want this codicil, Martin?" The question carried unease. My father's reply was cold. "It's done. She was never meant for this responsibility." I returned to my room, sat at my desk, and opened my leather-bound journal. My handwriting wavered as I forced myself to articulate boundaries. When they insult me, I will not argue. When they ignore me, I will not beg. When they praise me, I will not mistake it for love. The words steadied me. They were the thin walls of a fortress built against the poison creeping in. The next morning, my email pinged with a system notification. Backup completed. File restored. Video, safe room, original.mp4. My breath hitched. The safe room? I had never seen such a file before. Why had the system suddenly restored it now? What could be hidden in my father's vault, recorded and preserved, waiting for someone to stumble across it? Meanwhile, Tessa's star continued to rise. On social media, she posted pictures of herself standing in front of a new high-rise apartment, captioned, "Bought with my own hard work. Dreams do come true." The comments flooded in. "Queen! So inspiring." What her followers didn't know was that the bank transfer that secured her down payment had come directly from the Whitaker Trust, the same trust my grandmother intended for me to guard. My mother fed the media like a seasoned handler. Whispered tips to gossip columnists painted me as unstable, difficult, even ungrateful. An article ran under a glossy headline: Elder Whitaker daughter shuns family duties, focuses only on herself. The irony was knife-sharp. I had given up more than they ever knew: my time, my dreams, my independence, to keep our programs alive. But the narrative was already out there, and the world believed it. I combed through contracts late one night, searching for a foothold. That was when I noticed something strange: tiny symbols on the margin of a new agreement, almost hidden. At first, they seemed decorative, but then I recognized them: legal shorthand for undue influence, the kind of mark a wary lawyer might leave to flag coercion. Why was it there? Who was being coerced? Or perhaps the better question was, who had left me this silent breadcrumb? I slipped the papers back into the folder, my pulse steadying as I remembered my grandmother's voice. Justice doesn't scream, Sloane, it shines. That night, I walked along the riverbank, the city lights rippling across dark water. I thought of her hands, soft and wrinkled, clasping mine as she spoke of truth, like it was a seed waiting for the right soil. I let the cool air cleanse me, a pause between storms, a reminder that I was not yet beaten. When I returned home, I passed my father's study again. The door was ajar. On the floor near the safe, I noticed fresh scratches around the lock, as though someone had tried to pry it open. The edges were raw, metal scraped against metal. Someone had been desperate enough to test the vault in the dead of night. I stood frozen in the hall, heart pounding. Who was it? And what exactly inside that safe was worth breaking the lock for? The announcement came without warning, delivered in a conference room where the Whitaker Foundation staff had gathered for what they believed was a routine quarterly update. My father stood at the head of the table, flanked by Tessa and my mother, his voice firm, rehearsed. In the interest of protecting the family's legacy and ensuring long-term stability, all holdings, $10 million in assets, will be consolidated under Tessa's stewardship. He adjusted his cufflinks as though finalizing a detail as trivial as dinner reservations. The words struck like a hammer blow. The air went still. 10 million. The trust my grandmother built, the trust she told me, face to face, was mine to guard. My hand tightened around the edge of the table. No, I said, my voice low but steady. That's not what she wanted. That's not what she put in writing. My father's eyes narrowed, storm clouds gathering. Enough, Sloane. I won't be erased. The words tumbled out louder now, quivering but defiant. What followed was a blur of rage. Martin surged forward, his hand fisting in my hair, dragging me from my chair as gasps echoed around the room. Pain tore across my scalp as he yanked me toward the doors. You will not humiliate us! His roar filled the hall, swallowing the stunned silence of employees who dared not intervene. My knees scraped against the polished floor. My vision blurred, but I caught sight of Tessa, phone raised, recording. Later, I would see the clip on her social media. My sister having another meltdown, captioned with a laughing emoji. She had edited out his violence, leaving only my cries, reshaping the narrative into one more stain against me. The comments poured in. She's crazy. Ungrateful. Always jealous. By the time I staggered out of the building, my body shook with more than pain. It shook with betrayal so raw it hollowed me out. I had been stripped not just of money, not just of position, but of dignity before a roomful of witnesses. That night, I collapsed on the steps of a crumbling apartment complex I could barely afford. Rain slicked the concrete, plastering my hair to my face. I felt smaller than I ever had, invisible even to myself. But then a sound pierced the storm, a faint mewling. From the shadows, a drenched kitten stumbled toward me, trembling. I gathered it against my chest, its tiny heart fluttering. "You're safe," I whispered, unsure if I spoke to the cat or myself. The warmth of its fragile body reminded me that tenderness was still possible, even when cruelty seemed to own the world. For a moment, I chose compassion over retaliation. As I carried the kitten inside, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "I work for your family's lawyer. They're terrified of what's in the safe. Don't let them bury it." My breath hitched. Who was reaching out to me, and why now? Days bled together. Online, the storm raged. The video of me screaming outside the conference room spread, each share a dagger, each comment another nail in the coffin of my reputation. I became a cautionary tale of failure, of envy, of a daughter who couldn't measure up. Brands withdrew invitations. Friends stopped answering calls. Strangers hissed as though they knew me. Depression settled heavy as lead. I curled on the sofa, the kitten pressed against me, our breaths sinking in shallow rhythms. Food lost taste. Sleep offered no refuge. The walls of my apartment closed in, a tomb of humiliation. The final straw came at the pharmacy. I handed over my debit card, only for the cashier to frown. Declined. I tried again. Same result. My accounts had been frozen, my lifeline severed. I stood there, cheeks burning, while people in line stared, whispering. Even the right to buy medication had been stolen from me. That evening, another message arrived from the anonymous contact. This time, it was a link to a hidden drive. My hands trembled as I clicked, revealing documents stamped confidential. Minutes from a closed meeting between my parents, Tessa, and their legal counsel. Attached was an audio file. I pressed play. My mother's voice poured through the speakers, honeyed and venomous. Erase the tape. If that recording of her grandmother survives, everything falls apart. Do you understand? Destroy it. The blood drained from my face. The tape? My grandmother's voice? They were trying to obliterate her final words, the one thing strong enough to pierce their lies. Shaking, I reached for my phone. Instead of plotting revenge, I dialed a number from memory, the crisis helpline I once recommended to a scholarship student. A calm voice answered, guiding me through my breathing until the storm inside eased enough for me to feel my heartbeat steady. I wasn't ready to give up, not yet. As the call ended, I sat in the dim light, the kitten curled on my chest, the audio still echoing in my ears. My mother's command repeated like a curse. Erase the tape of her grandmother. But what exactly was on that tape? And why were they so afraid of it? The knock at my door came on a rain-soaked evening, 3 days after the anonymous messages had begun. When I opened it, a tall man in a wrinkled suit stood under the flickering hallway light. He introduced himself as Amir, an attorney with a reputation for challenging dynasties much larger than mine. "You're not the first," he said, stepping into my cramped apartment. "Families like yours think they can bury truth with money. They're wrong." Not long after, another figure appeared. June, the paralegal who had sent the cryptic texts. She looked younger than I expected, her nervous hands clutching a folder. "I couldn't watch them twist the law anymore," she whispered. "Your mother ordered documents altered. Your father signed while medicated. They don't care about legality, only control." She placed the folder on my table, pages spilling out like secrets too heavy to hold. Amir flipped through them with sharp eyes. "Here," he said, tapping one page. "See how the handwriting wavers? That's a signature taken under sedation. It's coercion, plain as day. And this," he held up a notarized record stamped in haste. "Your father wasn't in full capacity when he signed this codicil." June leaned forward. "And there's more. The safe your grandmother left behind. It holds a video. She recorded her will before she died. The original states everything. The 10 million, the trust, the condition that it stays with you as long as you continue the scholarship fund." My heart thudded as if it might break free from my chest. A video will. Proof she believed in me, even as the others tried to erase me. That night we went to the vault, June guiding us with codes she had memorized. Inside, amid the stale air and scent of iron, we found a small drive labeled in my grandmother's handwriting. Back in my apartment, we watched. There she was, frail but steady, eyes soft as she looked into the lens. "Sloane," she said, her voice trembling but resolute, "you are the keeper of this family's conscience. If you hold to compassion, then the legacy will not be lost. All of it is yours. If you protect what we built for those who need it." My hands shook as I paused the video. Tears blurred my vision. I could almost feel her hands on mine again. You are the keeper of compassion, she had always told me. Now here was proof. Yet, as the screen dimmed, something caught my attention. A faint watermark in the corner. Another copy existed somewhere in someone else's possession. But why two versions? Who held the original and for what purpose? We didn't have time to dwell. Amir sketched out our plan across my kitchen table, 3 layers, each as sharp as a blade. First, the legal strike. File an injunction to freeze all trust transfers, halting Tessa's spending spree. Second, the public front. Leak pieces of evidence, not enough to burn us in court, but enough to turn suspicion onto the family. Third, financial chokehold. Coordinate with regulators to flag transactions from the trust until ownership was resolved. June offered another tactic, something she called silent polling. Former employees of the foundation would be invited to submit anonymous statements. Within days, dozens poured in. Testimonies of Tessa demanding signatures under threat, of my parents rewriting records, of false narratives pushed to the media. Each story wove into a pattern of systemic abuse. The most daring step came when Amir suggested a mediation session. Legally recorded, the meeting would appear routine. But I hid a camera in my lapel. When the moment came, Lila leaned toward Tessa and whispered, "Don't forget your lines. Say your sister was unstable. Say she threatened us. Stick to the script." The camera captured it all. Her voice, her coaching, the blueprint of deception. In the quiet afterward, I stood before my mirror, rehearsing what I might one day say in court. I am not here to accuse. I am here to reveal. I practiced each line until the bitterness drained, leaving only clarity. I would not become a cold avenger. I would speak truth and let it cut sharper than rage ever could. But the night before we filed the injunction, Amir's phone buzzed. His expression hardened as he read the email. "They're threatening us," he said, passing me the screen. The message was simple, typed in bold letters. "Withdraw, or Sloane's past will be exposed. We know what she's hiding." My stomach dropped. My past? What secret could they possibly mean? The courtroom was colder than I expected, its marble walls swallowing sound, its high windows filtering in a sterile kind of daylight. I sat at the plaintiff's table, Amir beside me, June in the gallery with a laptop balanced on her knees. Across the aisle, my parents and Tessa looked carved from stone, their attorney whispering in clipped tones. When the judge entered, we all rose. My pulse thundered as I prepared to speak. This was it, the moment that would decide whether I remained erased or finally reclaimed my name. Amir opened with the evidence. "Your Honor, this is a video we'll recovered from the safe of the late Margaret Whitaker." He gestured to the screen as the monitor flickered to life. My grandmother appeared, fragile but resolute. Her voice filled the room. "This legacy belongs to Sloane, provided she continues the scholarship fund. She is the one who understands what this wealth was built for." Gasps rippled through the gallery. My parents shifted uncomfortably. Tessa crossed her arms, her jaw tight. But before relief could settle, the defense produced another video. Their version showed my grandmother too, but her words were different. "I leave the fortune to Tessa. She has the strength to lead." I stared, my blood running cold. A second will? The courtroom buzzed. The defense attorney smirked. "Clearly there is dispute. 2 conflicting testimonies." Amir leaned toward me. "It's fake," he whispered. "Wait." He called June forward. She presented a forensic analysis, metadata showing altered timestamps, mismatched hash values, and compression artifacts consistent with deepfake editing. The evidence glowed across the judge's screen, irrefutable. "This so-called second will is manufactured," Amir declared. "A deliberate attempt to deceive the court." The judge's frown deepened. "The court takes forgery very seriously?" I turned to Tessa. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Quietly, I whispered across the aisle, words only she might hear. "I wanted us to stand together. Once." My voice broke on the last word, grief twined with anger. But the session was far from over. The judge leaned forward. "Before I decide, play the audio recording from the closed meeting." The gallery hushed as the speakers crackled. My mother's voice rang out. "Just make Sloane disappear. That's all we need." disappear. My stomach dropped. What had they meant? Discredit me? Institutionalize me? Or something darker? The judge's expression hardened. We will reconvene after reviewing this in full. By the second hearing, the cracks had widened into chasms. A doctor testified that Martin had signed the codicil hours after a surgical procedure, still under anesthesia. His consent was legally void. The codicil, the supposed amendment stripping me from the will, collapsed under its own illegitimacy. Then came the third revelation. Financial investigators uncovered that Tessa had secretly mortgaged the trust against high-stakes gambling debts. She had leveraged assets she didn't even own, risking the foundation's future for personal desperation. When this was read aloud, her face blanched. Murmurs of disbelief swept through the courtroom. The tide outside shifted just as dramatically. Hashtags flooded the internet. "Let Sloane speak" trended across platforms. Clips from the mediation session surfaced. Lila's coaching caught on tape, instructing Tessa to smear me as unstable. For the first time, the public saw behind the Whitaker mask. At recess, I found my mother slumped in the hallway, her composure shattered. Her eyes, red and swollen, searched mine. "We only wanted to protect the family," she whispered, a confession or perhaps an excuse. For a moment, I almost hated her, but instead of turning away, I knelt, my arms encircling her trembling shoulders. "I will not let you break me," I said softly. "But I will not stop being your daughter." She wept into my sleeve, and I let her. Boundaries, not vengeance. Love tempered by distance. When court resumed, the judge delivered the interim ruling. Pending final resolution, control of the Whitaker Trust will be reassigned. His gaze swept the room, pausing just long enough for tension to coil. The silence that followed was suffocating. Who would hold the reins now? The verdict came on a crisp autumn morning, sunlight spilling through the courthouse windows like a benediction. The judge's voice was calm, deliberate, yet every word reverberated through me like the tolling of a bell. The court recognizes the validity of the original video will left by Margaret Whitaker. Control of the trust is hereby restored to Sloane Whitaker, the rightful beneficiary. Furthermore, given the actions taken against her, a no-contact order will be applied. The defendants may not approach or attempt to influence her, directly or indirectly. Relief swept over me, mingled with grief. This was justice, yet justice had arrived draped in ashes. I glanced at my family. My father stared at the floor, stripped of authority. My mother's hands trembled in her lap. Tessa's defiance had drained into silence, her eyes darting anywhere but mine. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but the family brand they once glorified was unraveling. Without a scapegoat to absorb their blame, the Whitaker machine faltered. Sponsors withdrew, partnerships dissolved, and the glossy facade of unity crumbled. We had been a stage play performed for the world, and now the set was collapsing piece by piece. Amir spoke plainly afterward. "If you want to preserve what's left, transparency is your only option. Sell the assets you don't need, pay the debts, and let the public see the truth." He called it the restitution plan, a blueprint for redemption not for my parents, but for the community our fortune had neglected. And for once, I didn't argue. Justice wasn't just about punishing them, it was about repairing what had been broken. Later that night, I walked through the house that was no longer mine, yet somehow still haunted me. Dust motes floated in golden shafts of light. On the mantel, a family portrait smiled down, a relic of a lie. I lifted the frame, studied the faces, my father stiff with pride, my mother polished with charm, Tessa radiant, and me half-shadowed at the edge. I could have smashed it. Instead, I set it gently aside. I wasn't here to erase the past. I was here to outgrow it. As I placed the frame down, a folded slip of paper fluttered to the floor. My breath caught when I saw my grandmother's handwriting. "If you are reading this, it means you chose the truth. Remember, freedom is not in wealth, but in what you do with it." My throat tightened. It was as though she had been waiting for me at the end of the storm, her voice guiding me still. In the weeks that followed, I honored her words. The scholarship fund grew. not as a quiet side project, but as the beating heart of the trust. I opened mentorship programs for those crushed under the weight of families like mine, young women told they were liabilities, sons disinherited for disobedience, children erased by the very people who should have protected them. My pain became blueprint, my scars instruction. I refused to wield my victory as a weapon. No scorched earth, no triumphant revenge parade. The greatest revenge was simple. I lived freely, and I lived truthfully. That was a language my family had never understood. Tessa's reckoning came in the form of mandated therapy. Reports leaked of her addiction spiraling out of control, debts closing in. But instead of celebrating, I hoped quietly that she might find her way back. My mother wrote a public apology, polished, rehearsed, but the tears in her eyes when we last spoke suggested some part of it was real. My father resigned from his business ventures, retreating into obscurity. Each of them bore the weight of their choices, consequences fitting their deeds. One morning, I sat in my apartment, the kitten now a lively companion scrambling across my bookshelf. I laughed softly as he tried to reach the top shelf, paws batting at spines of books he didn't understand. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warm and clean, painting the walls in gold. For the first time in years, the air felt breathable. I picked up my grandmother's letter again, running my fingers over the ink. She had been right. Freedom wasn't in the millions restored to me. It was in the quiet joy of building something honest, in knowing I had not let their cruelty calcify into hate. I had chosen compassion without surrendering to weakness, boundaries without abandoning empathy. The storm was over, though scars remained. Yet even scars, I realized, could be beautiful. They were proof that I had survived, proof that the phoenix had risen not to destroy, but to illuminate. As dawn broke, I leaned back in my chair, watching the kitten finally perch triumphantly on the shelf. "We made it," I whispered. And in that small, ordinary moment, I felt the extraordinary weight of peace.